this large crowd. Do you think we can stand the crowd? Good morning. I'm Kay Williams, Chairman of the Properties Committee. This is our working session meeting that we have every month. Glad some of you are here as guests, sparse as you are. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty for all. Thank you. We do have a quorum. We'll go to item 2.01, the minutes from the February 8th meeting. Anyone have any changes or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, they shall be filed as written. Thank you. Item 3.01 is the update on the facilities capital projects. Carl Wilhelm.
Thank you, Director Williams. Good morning, committee and members of the audience. This is the March Capital Projects and Facilities Maintenance Update. R.H. Johnson Environmental Services Maintenance Yard, property fences and gates. This project is in final fence and gate area construction. It is currently being installed, and the last step is gates and locks, and then a paint job of that fence. So happy that's moving along. Should be finished soon. Over at Beardsley, we have an approved project for the Clay Club flooring epoxy floor project that is currently out for bid. And tentatively, actually, we received all the bids, and I have a vendor that can be awarded. So our time frame to start that is approximately May 10th. I'll be working closely with the club and Russ Boston's team on removing all the equipment out of the room at that point in time and then starting the reflooring project. So look forward to that in May. And then also two of the last remaining projects in the capital budget, the Desert Trails Pro Shop patio shade structure and the Pro Shop small storage area roof structure. They are currently out for bid. And that is the monthly activity report for CIP.
Does the committee have any questions for Carl? Good morning, Russ.
Good morning. All right, in the world of facilities maintenance, we are still painting Palm Ridge. We're about 80% done, and then we'll, like as I stated before, we'll come back to the aquatics and fix the woodpecker damage, and then move on to something else. While we were painting Palm Ridge, we did stop and do some kitchen play area repairs at the pickleball courts. We got some material from the vendor and pulled color in those areas that we're wearing, which will extend its life to when Carl has those naturally scheduled to be resurfaced. And that is the end of my report.
Anyone on the committee have any questions for Russ? Okay. Moving right along. That takes us to 4.01 with the fiscal year 24-25 capital budget project update from Carl.
Thank you, Director Williams. Here we are in March. This is our 7th month of reviewing the project planning process for capital budget implementation. And we have just a few changes to discuss today. Remember that our categories are in the tan area are for new capital. Our capital items in the blue that we'll be discussing today are projects that I would manage or other departments that work closely with me. And then the areas from the green are also reserve study item areas that Todd Patty manages. And then our last section will be allowances. So also in this presentation, we are at the project planning process step where we're reviewing items $100,000 and greater. The last 2 months, we did $50,000 and greater. So if we have any questions on those 100,000 and greater projects, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Moving right along into the capital section of new. Technically, we have no changes in the March column reported from February to March. However, I do have a comment to make. I had this conversation with Director Williams previously in the week, and then I reported what I'm going to share today just for discussion purposes with Budget and Finance and Charter Clubs this week. So if you would look down to the line item, Palm Ridge Pickleball Monitor Station, 4x6 with AC and electrical panel. This committee did a fantastic job in walking all the properties back in October and November, and we came up with various items that needed repair or ideas to help improve the community. And one of those ideas at Palm Ridge was to consider putting a monitor station at the pickleball courts at Palm Ridge. And I think the observance came from the fact that, we had a monitor checking in pickleball players in the early morning hours, and they were out in the elements, and everybody recognized or asked the question, what are your conditions like throughout the rest of the year? And, it gets hot as the year progresses. So you came up with a recommendation to put this booth out there. After further analysis and providing the cost, nothing has changed there, so it's a booth for $30,000. But we have another component to the budget, and that is the operating expenses, and that's where the portion of staff and employee costs come in. So I think it's prudent, based on staff discussions, to at least share those financials with you to make the best decisions whether your recommendation is to move forward with this or not. So just let me kind of line this up. Is at Palm Ridge, we currently have a staff member working 7 to 11, 4 days a week, with an approximate $11,939 budgeted expense. The idea of manning that booth full-time would be an increase from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and it would go to 5 employees at 20 hours per week, which would be an additional cost of $62,681. So I think it's prudent that when we consider this booth and the purpose of checking in, people that come into that facility, the combination of the two, are we getting an ROI? Like I said, this is just a consideration for you to think about. $30,000 for the booth, and then the ongoing yearly fees of staffing that to 98 hours a week. So this has nothing now to do with that particular project, but when we discuss these cost effects for staffing an idea of a booth at Palm Ridge, we also do this at R.H. Johnson. And currently we have one staff member, or technically 2 staff members, that share the weekly load from 5:30 to 10:30, 6 days a week, and we budget $22,386 for that. The purpose of the Palm Ridge idea is to make sure that we have coverage and accountability to whoever is coming in that facility. And in technicality, shouldn't we have the same at R.H. Johnson? So if we covered R.H. Johnson at a full-time coverage from 5:30 a.m. to 9 p.m., that would also increase our budgeting for staff $59,696. So between the two, we'd have an impact on our yearly employee budget of $122,377. These are my calculations based on just a $14.35 hourly rate and the hours. There are other things that accounting takes into consideration, and their numbers would probably be a little cleaner, tighter, and maybe even a little more impacted by benefits and wages. So that $122,000 for the 2 areas is not currently in the budget. So like I said, R.H. Johnson has nothing to really do with this conversation, but globally, The idea of staffing one facility and not having that same consideration is what staff talked about. And we just thought it prudent that we at least share that with all the committees. And so that's my comments on the only item that needed discussion in the new section. Russ, if you could move me into reserve study items. Yeah, it'll be brief, okay. So, moving over to the March proposed costs for reserve study items. These items come directly out of our reserve study modeling tool. The only changes, the first change in this area is Todd Petty and accounting have done a little bit more due diligence on their vehicle evaluations. So landscaping vehicles was reduced from 3 to 2, and that you will see the reduction in cost from February to March from $90,989 down to $56,903. Moving along, we had a new line item come up. So in previous years, unknown servers for the IT department, if there was any failure or need for replacement, that was allocated out of the allowance section. But we have 3 particular servers that we know today need to be replaced. So instead of doing that out of allowances, we thought it prudent to just put this into this year's capital budget. So IT requires 3 servers to replace for the TEG point of sale area of our computer system. And that's an addition of $29,172 to the capital budget. And in the reserve study blue area, there is no other changes. Moving on to reserve study items in the golf landscape or golf maintenance and golf ops area. The only change is a new addition. Todd has been presenting over the last 7 months his plans for golf, and we caught an error where we did not include the Lakeshore, the Trail Ridge Lake Shoreline hardscape on number 3. So we've included the $48,000 for the improvement to the shoreline of that lake, which is going to be a riffraff product around the edge with a Todd's product for sealing the basin, and that's some form of spray. So again, that's the only change in the green section, and there are no changes in the allowance category, so that still stays at $420,000. Any questions?
I have one, Carl. On the pickleball monitor station, what other clubs, Arc, Metal, Wood, provide their own monitors? Is it a situation where pickleball could not be able to supply a monitor while they were there that would utilize the facility so it wouldn't be a staffing situation?
I'm going to say that we discussed this as staff. There's probably a possibility that that through shared discussions with pickleball, that during their hours, that's a possibility. We'd have to get a cooperation agreement with them. But please remember that Palm Ridge is not entirely a pickleball club facility. None of them are, and that would include even going into the tennis. All of our facilities are for member use and club hour designation. So we would still have a gap, is what our feelings would be if even if pickleball provided a self-monitoring moment. So just, that's the facts that we know.
Carl, thank you for your presentation today. Thank you for the additional information. On the pickleball monitoring station, I was one of the members of the committee at the time who raised some concern about us having a staff member out there from 7 till 11 or 7 till noon. I forget exactly which at the time, especially during the summer and in particular as well during the coldest parts of the winter, believe it or not. We were concerned about the risk to our staff of being exposed to that environment, you know, having to sit in the heat for 4 or 5 hours and so forth. I don't recall us having any discussion about the need to increase. So I think we might be having a little bit of scope creep here. our concern was more, at least in members of the committee, correct me if I'm wrong, but our concern was more around, do we have a safety issue with regard to employees, particularly since we tend to employ older individuals who mirror our community? Do we have a safety issue? And if so, is this one potential way to address it, to create some type of environmentally controlled monitor station? So I don't think we were ever advocating adding full-time staff to that. I think it was more around the safety.
So staff fully appreciates that point of view, and we're fine with that, but we thought it prudent, again, to share that if we were to go to a full-time monitoring, that would be the impact of cost. If this committee is still recommending to the governing board to put a guard check, then we're happy to place a guard check there.
Well, my only thought was, I agree with Alan. We were more concerned with the existing staff that was there. But to Tom's point, you know, maybe it's time for tennis and pickleball to do some of the monitoring to save on the cost of staff. So just a thought.
John?
Thank you. I will try my best to not be too redundant, but I feel very strongly about this issue, and I feel I have to express myself. First of all, I want to thank you, Carl, and commend you for your courage to bring this up and present the facts to us. They may or may not be of your origin, and I commend you for the good of getting it out in the open for discussion. I did view the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, and I know that it became something of a hot button at there. So again, I applaud you. That being said, I would like to add that I checked the website as best I could on pickleball, and as near as I could determine, they probably have 100% or shared court time for at least 50% of the hours available. And so my thought is that the monitoring really needs to be a separate issue, and when this goes to the governing board, they should recognize there's quite a bit of time there where the club could reasonably provide a monitor, which would be consistent with what clubs do all throughout the community. That would remove any burden on staff. The second point there is that when it is only open time on those courts, I don't see why the gates can't be shut, a surveillance camera placed on the courts, and any owner members that want to use the courts can go through the monitor station inside Palm Ridge and then exit to the courts. Right now, I believe the monitors at Palm Ridge are required once an hour or something to go out to the pickleball courts and check them. So I think there is a precedent there for our monitors inside, safely inside, to fill in only the gaps that are 100% free time. And I think I would suggest that if we vote on a recommendation on this, Madam Chair, that we stipulate quite clearly that staffing that guard station is not a part of our recommendation on the guard shack. Thank you.
Nancy?
You took my thunder mostly.
Thanks, John.
He's so tender. I just kind of want to ride on what John had said and the monitor. The clubs that I've been in, I have to monitor 16 hours every year, in 4-hour increments. So I think some of that does have to fall back to the pickleball court. I'm not sure why it matters if a guard shack or a monitor station up at Palm Ridge has anything to, with RHJ. Everybody's not born equal. The world isn't fair, And I think the things that are working pretty good here at RH and I think that we can cut back staff, and I'm sure we wouldn't even need to hire someone. I'm sure there's a monitor around or an attendant who would love to pick up a few more hours. So I guess I'm kind of with the rest of these people that it's a personnel issue, and I would like to see that shack out there. But as to what the pickleball club decides to do to monitor it, and personnel issues will definitely come back, to the board. So that's about it. John said it all. Well, so did Alan. Well, so did Sherry.
And just to be clear, we haven't had any discussions with pickleball on this yet, but,
Okay.
it was just a discussion about making sure that everybody saw the cost of the shack, the monitors booth, and then, the impact of cost if we were to go to any higher rate of staffing.
I really don't have any comments right now on the thing, but I've always felt that there's nothing wrong with pickleball doing some monitoring work out there. I know in the past they've done some. I think staff needs to sit down and take a look at the hours of operation. Having somebody out there all day long doesn't make sense, especially during the summertime, because nobody's going to be out there playing. They might be playing early in the morning, and that's about it. It's just too hot to be out there all day long. The shack, I agree, needs a better monitoring station out there especially in the morning time, to keep people out of the sun, the rain, or whatever happens to be going on out there, and also to control. I think in the future we'll probably be putting some equipment out there that will need to lock up, and this needs to be taken into consideration. But I think the thing is that staff needs to get together with pickleball, tennis, etc., take a look at the courts, figure out what's best, and make their recommendations or do what they need to do. But we need to have a station there.
Before we move on to any other items, is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this issue? If so, please come forward, state your name and your rec card number.
Good morning, Bud Metter, 132059. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Carl, thank you for your presentation. I want to offer this thought just as food for thought for your consideration, addressing the issue of the observers, controllers, whatever it is you want to call that position. Have we thought about perhaps institutionalizing a position of chairman of volunteers who could solicit the various clubs, the various communities we have here, and provides, a steady, organized, stable list of people who could take the burden off of your shoulders, solicit the community, and come online with volunteers. I can offer more offline for you, but just offer that as food for thought.
Thank you. Anyone else? Before we move on to our next activity, does any of this committee have any comments on any of the other items that have had changes that Carl just went over with us? On any of the other pages? Nancy?
Okay, are you talking about going through these blue pages?
Yes.
Which we have?
Yes. Any questions that
Yeah,
Carl might answer of
okay.
anything on any of those first five pages?
Okay.
We've only
Uh,
got as far as page 1, so.
I'm going to kick the can at the softball field. Once again.
I can cover that in my $100,000 presentation, unless you
Okay.
want to defer.
I'm just asking if they, since this is our last day to make any
That's fine.
recommendations to the governing board, I want to make sure that everyone is clear and have answers to the questions they might have
Okay.
in addition to just the 100,000 that you wrote over. Sorry, Nancy.
Oh, that's fine. I left last meeting a little dissatisfied in that we had, I think, maybe not unanimously, but we had voted to not go through with this $500,000 expense at the softball field. And then we were told that it was not safe and that the poles, the rods were stressed and there were stress marks on them. And for the life of me, I've been over there twice and I can't find any of that in any of those poles. I regret that I didn't call Russ to go over with me. I did not climb up them. But we've got a few, stabilizing things out there too. And I think what happened was somewhere in this meeting, we were told this was a safety issue. And at least as much time as I've had on property, if it's safety, like we were talking about the Garchak, we're on it. I mean, if that's what's going to happen. But I am not sure that there's not another solution for this that's cheaper than the 500,000. And maybe Russ or Carl, you can come up with the reason for how all that came to be, all of a sudden, the safety issue.
So
ahead,
the safety
sorry.
issue, Nancy, if you were on the walkthrough at Coons, was the day we noticed it. Was walking through and looking at that fence, we found 2 poles that were severed in half. It was plain to see, and we had it fixed that week.
Okay,
So-
so that's where the 2 structures.
Yes,
they're-
ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, that's the 2. I
Yes.
didn't
Yeah.
look real good at those. I wasn't sure how new,
It was-
that was.
It
So-
was very fresh to everybody that was there. I had not seen that before either.
Yeah. So we don't any longer, with this item, have a safety issue. Is that
Currently,
correct?
no, that is correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carl.
My closing comment on that would be, we've never presented it as a safety issue project. It's a reserve study item that we felt was time for replacement. And then the byproduct of that is what Russ just shared, that we found a safety, but all safety items here are always repaired immediately.
Yeah, thank you. I was the one holdout on the last vote on this, and I voted against it. Carl or Russ, I'm not sure where to direct this, but I'm just wondering, my understanding of the cost of this project was driven to a large degree by adding an additional 8 feet to the 24-foot fence. And it was going to require new footings or supports, and it became quite a big job, obviously. I'm wondering if there isn't an alternative if the fence needs to be replaced, replacing it in kind. Would that be a much less expensive issue, leaving the softball club with how to deal with balls going over the fence by maybe restricting bats or making a rule that over the fence is an out automatically? That's done in a lot of softball leagues. I don't think it's an onerous request to make of people if it could save the community a lot of money. But I have no idea about the practicality of just replacing the fence in time and whether that would save us money. I'm wondering if either of you could weigh in on that, enlighten us. Thank you.
So it is my opinion that, well, let me give you the facts of how it exists today. So first baseline, the first third is already at a 30-foot. So it's not an 8-foot addition, it's a 6-foot addition in the parts that are not already netted at 30-foot. So it's a like-for-like replacement, but new reinforced appropriately sized posts with the chain link fencing going up. The additional 6 foot is for a netting to be 100% around the field to increase it to 30 foot. But I would still have a portion that is today already at 30 foot with netting. If I held off, and yes, there would be a savings if I did not put the 6 additional feet anywhere, because that's a whole nother post structure based on the quotes that I had. So you're going to have created an issue in the first baseline where we currently know that we need, the 6 additional feet in the netting. If I don't do it with this project, it's probably never going to get done until 20, 30 years from now when the fence needs probably another replacement at some point because of logistics. So that's my only comments on that. I mean, yes, there would be a savings if we did not do the additional post for the 6 foot additional net, but I think a portion of the field probably deserves the 6 foot additional netting based on today's current play.
Thank you. Without putting you on the spot here, would the savings be significant or insignificant?
I'd have to
Just
report
as
that
best you
back
could.
at next meeting.
Thank you.
Carl, when we went over this previously, one of the things that you talked about was when we do this replacement, it will require some pullback of the outfield track to then do the work to put the new footers, I'm assuming, in and so forth. And that outfield track, I believe in your research study, is scheduled for repair or replacement some number of years ahead. What is that time frame? When is that due for its replacement?
If I'm going to guess, I
Okay.
believe I did the field AstroTurf in somewhere around 2018.
Okay.
And I believe the expected life out of that is approximately 12 years. So 2028, 2030,
Okay.
somewhere in that time frame, 2030.
The genesis of my question is this. One, there is some risk that when we pull that track back, it could get damaged. I believe, and I think you mentioned that on the walkthrough, minimal, but some risk. And two is there is some cost to pull that back, put it back down and so forth. And what I'm wondering, and safety issue, now seems to be resolved, is would it be more prudent for us to do both of those projects at the same time to avoid that duplication of expense? And if the outfield fence, albeit not ideal, is functional and safe, could the current fence remain in place until 2028, 3 years from now, when we actually do all of that work? I realize the expense of that would be greater, but we avoid the duplicating costs of then having to pull back that outfield track twice.
It's good logic, and yes, your recommendation could certainly be that. And I would say that the onus then falls back on Russ and I on just making sure, and Todd Patty, of continually observing that fence year after year, not just assuming 2030 is the next window, based on the circumstances of, stresses and cracking. So if a couple more fence posts got cracked, I would say we will be right back at this committee saying, let's do it in either next year or the year after. You know what I'm saying? So, so your recommendation is, your logic there is valid, and I defer to that.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions on any of the other items rather than the field? Take one last look and then we'll proceed. You're good? Just to enlighten our large crowd here, Thanks to Russ for such quick action. And just my curiosity got the best of me, so I had to ask Russ, well, what did it cost to stabilize those two areas? And it was under $100, so quite a difference between 100 and 500,000. Anyway, as we mentioned, today is our last opportunity to make recommendations to the governing board on the 24-25 proposed budget items. This is going to be a difficult budget year ahead. It's important that we consider want versus need on all projects. At our February properties meeting, we reached consensus to recommend to the governing board that the $100,000 library expansion not be included, and at that time, the $50,000 Kuntz tennis facility item be removed from the budget. The remaining large dollar items that we've talked about now, that we haven't mentioned yet, but I want you to give thought to before we make our final recommendation to the board, which will be done tomorrow. We had discussion about, is now the right time to spend $225,000 on the Lizard Acres remodel? Does anybody want to make any comments on that? And the other items that we've talked about, the other big item that was not resolved at the last meeting was what we've just been discussing, and that is the softball fence. At this time, I would welcome any comments or a motion of interest of what you think where we ought to recommend to the governing board after our nice report from Carl today and bringing us up to date. So, Nancy?
I want to go back to the first page, starts with Lizard Acres. I have a concern with the Beardsley Park iron fence, and that is just a very simple, of course we need to do something other than snow fences out there. I walked that twice, and here's my concern. That stretch of the fence, Carl, that goes along the parking lot, what do you have planned, either a fence on a rail, or how do we get ambulances in? I'm looking at it from a shooter point of view, and I'm sorry, I've got a law enforcement background, but somebody would get in and be on the stage. I don't want to fence people in where they can't run. And sort of, if we don't have an opening there, or a gate, or a big gate that could swing very quickly and suddenly. A few years ago, we had the water sprinklers come on. That was pretty fun to watch everybody get up and run. But I don't want to fence people in, so to speak. I'm from Wyoming, so of course I don't want to fence people in. Anyhow, what do you see as the solution? You probably already thought of this.
So the fence would definitely create a control point along both the aquatics parking lot and the arts and crafts parking lot, meaning the fact that you just cannot exit the park through the landscaping, through the trees and bushes at any nilly-willy point. And you certainly wouldn't consider exiting across mini golf as a shortcut, and people generally don't. So that, you know, it's a very turbulent area to walk across if that's what you were intending to do. Your scenario is valid and extreme, but we are not shutting off any of the current access points that are safe and healthy. So every access point that the park has today has a gate, and it is also a gate wide enough for a vehicle. So that's part of that planning. So you're going to have large 10-foot openings. And technically, they're never going to be closed. They're going to be always open because events, you know, are monitored by volunteers to take tickets, you know, check your tickets to get in for events. During normal operations of the day, the park is open. But once the fence would be installed, if approved, you know, now you just have eliminated the fact that anybody can sneak into the park. And I think our largest reason for asking for the fence in the first place is the savings on staff labor to erect and tear down, the cost of replacing the cheap snow fence each and every year. That's really, we're trying to help staff, mitigate, injury, labor costs, all the work that's involved in putting up that park. The fence is only 4 foot tall, so, I would say in an extreme emergency, somebody will be able to get over the fence, but you're gonna have all the access points that you currently have, 10 foot wide, always open. So the fence is not intended to lock the park down. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that does, and I've been looking at the map, that kind of thing. And I'm sorry, I know we're not in the Mideast or something, but these situations do occur, and to have our more mature residents and people with walkers and people who just can't jump a 4-foot fence, that would be me. I think if there's panic there, I don't know if people are going to be like, where was my nearest exit? I feel better if that whole thing would open and people get out. But, anybody's going to come in with a band. You're not going to stop the bad person from coming in. I know it's very extreme. I saw that great big run along that parking lot, and I just thought, yeah, there's a couple of exits there when people panic. We'll be piled up there if that should occur.
Well, I
I'm
can
just
certainly
concerned.
add another gate. It really would not affect the cost at all. So
Yeah.
that's an opportunity there if that's a recommendation that this committee would like to make. I can add another gate in the aquatics run. It's not a problem. The only impact I probably would say that if there's a gate, there needs to be a sidewalk, so there will be a bit of a
Yeah.
cost there, maybe an additional $5,000 to $10,000 in concrete work. But I
And
would
those
just
10-foot gates, I'm sorry, Carl, those 10-foot gates will allow the ambulance in, or
yes,
cops or
yeah,
something.
that's a vehicle.
Easily come in,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and that would have to come off the parking lot, of
Yep,
course.
and the same sidewalk
Okay.
entries that we currently use for our maintenance vehicles to do their
Right,
service, so.
okay.
And then I'd like
Just
to
a
liken
concern.
the idea is that if you would consider this idea of, you go to any other public sporting event, you have control points. It's all fenced in, nobody allowed to, so it's a
Yeah,
big
the
part.
control points and the reason that we're doing it to begin with is perfect.
So,
I'm
they
just
have to take
concerned.
those emergency scenarios into consideration too, so.
Okay,
And they're still gated and closed and turnstiled, and so, I don't think we're creating anything different than any other public venue would have the same thought or concerns.
but we have a different audience here.
We do,
So
we do.
we've got
Point's well taken.
people over the age of 55, I think.
So
All right,
the best
thanks,
thing I
Val.
could serve is say, I could put an additional gate in somewhere,
Okay,
or two.
okay. Thanks, Carl.
So I was part of the original walkthrough that said we need to replace this ugly snowflake fencing. And it was ridiculous that the rec center comes out every year and puts that up. And the big events are the Spring Fest and the Oktoberfest, or, and when Boomers rents the whole facility or somebody rents the whole facility to be able to control people coming in. And, it's an event. I know we're in a different world now, but that snowflake fence is so ugly. And we're putting on a wonderful event. We should just showcase our facilities.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the point of getting people in and out, absolutely, we need to control that. And we need to know who's having tickets and who's in here. My whole thing was getting people out if we had to. So thank you, Carl. Thanks, Sherry.
Okay, if I may, before you leave this topic,
Yes,
Russ back here. This was a properties project put on the list last year. And as Sherry stated, Sherry, Tom, and Nancy were there, walked through with Roberta as the snow fence was up. They thought it'd be better as a fence, which is why Carl has it on the list today. Just clarifying.
thank you.
I completely agree, and I remember being there. Like I said, the fence has to be put up. There's no doubt about that. My point is just keep an idea of who's we're fencing in. I know who we're keeping out.
Okay, committee, are we ready to see if there is any changes we want to make? And I'm going to start with the 4 items we've talked about. that are significant in dollar, and see if you wish to change or add on to the recommendation going to the governing board. So we'll just go in order and start with the Lizard Acres renovation.
Director Williams, can I ask one question of you?
Sure.
On the subject of fence, though, would you just give me some guideline? Would you like me to bolster the cost from 57,500 to 67,500 for the possible anticipation of another access point and a sidewalk? Would you just consider that so that I can do that now or not?
Is the committee in agreement that we would like to have that done? I think we probably are. Yes, please.
Okay, then I am going
Yeah,
to,
Alan has another question first.
Carl, how many access points currently along that section that's in question?
I think I'm beyond that in my report, so I believe it's 7. So 2 are maintenance, and that's at the farthest end, so 1 by Horseshoe and 1 by the opposite garbage can. And then the rest of the 5 are the existing sidewalk entrances that we use already. So 2 along Aquatics parking lot and 3 along the Beardsley Arts and Crafts parking lot.
And then on the other areas of the fence, I assume, and I don't need to count, but I assume similarly you'll have access points in other points around that fence so that if people have to get out another direction, they will be able to get through on those other sides as well. Or is there any other sides?
Well, it's just an L.
Okay.
So, on the aquatics run, you have a double gate for maintenance. You have a large gate, single gate for persons, then close to the pavilion for persons, and then it comes across the meditation garden, which is an unaccessible point anyway. And then you have the 2 entrances by the meditation garden and the Ramada number 3. And then you're going to have a new access point at the end by the monitor booth for mini golf. And then beyond that is the next access point for golf, for landscape maintenance. So that's your 7.
And that mirrors currently what you guys are using when you do the snow fencing type stuff.
With the exception that there is no gate, it's just an open area to mini golf. But this helps control, mini golf use, if you will. So that would be the only one that's new.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
Are there any changes in thoughts on what you want to recommend as far as doing the Lizard Acres renovation project in this upcoming 24-25 fiscal year, or if you think that should be delayed to a future date? Okay.
I am proposing that the project now costs $67,500 for the change of a gate, which is slightly insignificant, and the majority of it would be a safe walking point, which would be a concrete walkway. I would not list it at that. It's just my opportunities to make the recommendations from this club correct, whatever changes we deem best. That's correct.
We just need to reach consensus. There is consensus, as I'm viewing you, to make that change because of the safety concerns that we've just discussed. Is there anything else you need, Karen? Okay. Okay. Going back to where we started, do you wish to have, after this additional information and further talks and knowing that it's a budget year to be cautious, we need to look carefully at all of these items. So do you wish to make any change on the Lizard Acre renovation project being included in the 24-25 budget or at some other time? Yeah.
Okay, is it possible for us to vote again on that, or is that redundant?
No, it's possible. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to take another vote on it through this
Okay.
committee if.
You want to go first, John?
I'll look at you.
I vote. Go ahead. Continue with the project.
To continue it in the current year's budget.
Correct.
Okay. Nancy?
I'm going to vote no, simply because I want to know what's going on with our little restaurant that we all love, and it's dear. And this is so close. I'm just going to say no. I want it to be a little smoother, I guess. So I'm just going to say no, and it's a tight budget year. No.
John?
Yes.
Tom? Sharon?
Boy, I have struggled with this one. I'm going to say no.
Okay. So we have 3 yeses? Is that correct? Is that what you have, Karen? And 3 noes. So the buck stops here. I seldom get to vote on anything at this meeting, but this is why we don't have ties, so that the director that gets to be in the doghouse or be on the favorite hit list and gets roses the next day. But in all seriousness, I have to vote no. I just think it is the wrong time. I don't disagree with the project, but the rationale why I'm saying no is because we are not gaining more spaces of any kind. There are issues to be resolved, but I don't think we've got it figured out yet how to resolve them. And like you say, with the change with the restaurant there that may be bringing about other changes, I just think it's the wrong time. So that resolves. Right, we were just doing a consensus, a revised consensus from the last one. In all fairness, going down the list to what we voted on the last time, do you have any changes you want to make on the library expansion, the $100,000 that's in this year's budget for additional work? It was in our recommendation last month to not pursue that at this time with that $100,000. Does anyone change their mind, or is there anything, other questions that have raised that you would like to ask about that? If not, we will leave it as is. The Coons Tennis Facility, $50,000 project to look at possible revival, renovation, or whatever of those 6 courts that are there. We had reported to the governing board that we did not feel that was appropriate to spend that money at this time, and for the benefit of the audience, part of the rationale for that was the fact that we've had pickleball club come to us at least 4 meetings and say, we don't want it, we don't want to be there. But more important than that, than one club having the authority to pick and choose where and when they want to be, our bigger concern was that is our last available space to develop. When we have needs of, let's say, a new building, we don't have a lot of land to put a new building on. So I just think the timing is wrong. Yes, it's not attractive right now, but is that a good enough reason to spend $50,000 for something we don't want? So that's where we were coming from on that, and just wanted to make sure you were all still comfortable with that we agreed on the last meeting. Okay. And then the last one, of course, is the softball field fence replacement. Ellen?
We've had some, in my opinion, some new information that was presented today on this vis-a-vis the issue of the broken poles and the safety issue, and that there has been repair done, albeit still an area of concern, but I think significant enough for us to reconsider this. So I would like to ask for us to do a revote on this. My personal opinion on this is I think this is an item that is needed, but I think the most prudent fiscal thing for us to do is to tie it in with the timing of the outfield track so that those 2 things are done together. I believe it reduces risk of extra expenditures that this community doesn't need to incur. It makes more sense to, if we're going to have to pull that track back anyway, to time it so that we replace the track and the fence at the same time. So I would recommend we revote, and I would personally change my vote to a no.
Any other comments, Nancy?
I don't quite know how all of the budgeting works, but when I need my new car, I stick $50 away every month. Can we do that? Can we put $100,000 someplace, Carl, and then the next year so it doesn't kill us so much in 2008? Thank you.
So as with all reserve study items, the year that we are proposing, the philosophy behind it is if it's approved, it's a fully funded project. So the reserve funds for these projects are, because they're reserve study items, they're assets that we are tracking and we are saving per the useful life. So, okay, so all we're doing here is just, and I mean this politely, is kicking the can to whatever the logic this committee puts to that, so.
Any other comments from any of you? Sherry, we'll just start with you. Do you want to vote yes or your consensus on what Alan just described? Or are you voting no?
I'm voting that we take this off.
Tom? Alan?
Also, no. Off.
Tom? Sherry? John? Okay. Thank you all. I think that should take care of our obligations to get our report into the governing board tomorrow. And that moves us on to the last item on the agenda. Russ, you're up.
Thank you. So Woodshop approached us with some storage concerns. Hi, Tom. They would like to buy a short version of what we already have in form of a storage container. We did do a site visit over at Kuntz, and back alongside what already exists is the landscape maintenance area and the theater storage is out what we consider out of sight, out of mind. And while we were looking at this area, Model Railroad over at Beardsley also was looking for storage, and they didn't care where, because we explained to them there was nowhere at Beardsley to hide such a thing. So we rewalked Kuntz and found that we do in fact have room for two side by side. I already ran this by Todd, as it impacts him probably more than anybody. He graciously said it, no impact of him. And matter of fact, he needs to make some modifications so we have, so we can maintain our access through here. We would let the oleanders grow up, paint it to match the existing building, and nobody would ever know it's there. Any questions? I knew you would.
Well, Russ, I just might mention that of the two that the ARC has, one has the single door that opens, the other has the double door that opens, so you could actually get a vehicle, a wider thing in. So when they're going to store, they just, it's an item that we didn't think about after we got the first one. So when the second one we did with the two doors, so that's just information.
Yeah, Carl supplied them with the wheres and the whos. They got together and they pretty much got a handle on what exactly they need. Our task was finding a place for it and then running it by you all, make sure everybody's okay with it. So.
Any other questions, Nancy?
This is the metal club? Did you say?
No, the wood shop.
Wood shop, okay.
Wood shop.
And the railroad.
And the
And
railroad.
the railroad.
Yes.
Okay, for some reason I got metal. I'm like, they're not going to want to run across town to get a piece of iron. Right, it was metal. I mean,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you, I totally
No,
get it.
no worries.
Thanks, Russ.
Yep.
Russ, as I understand it, both of the clubs are willing to pay for these themselves.
100%. That's correct. Yes.
Okay. All that's really necessary from us is to, oh, I'm sorry, Sherry.
So I have one question.
Hmm?
Is there there won't be any hazardous materials or anything like that stored in these containers?
No. No hazardous, they have no reason to even have hazardous materials.
Okay, just
Yeah.
want to make sure what
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
storing is not another safety issue.
Nope.
Any other questions?
Let them do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that from what I'm seeing, from the nods, everyone is in agreement with that This is a good location that Russ and Carl have found that is usable space, not an eyesore, but will be a great asset, and both clubs are willing to pay for them. So do I have consensus that everyone feels that that is a good thing, and congratulations to the club for willing to spend some money for the things they want, so, okay.
Now, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but this item is also on the governing board agenda?
We will be reviewing that.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, it'll be a very brief just update to the rest of the governing board on your presentation today and the consensus of the board to authorize it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments that the committee would like to make at this time? Any comments from the audience on anything?
Mike Cassandra, 112330. We've had some problems with the tennis court surface. There's a lot of grit showing up on the courts. It was reported about a year ago to management, and it's been reported recently to the lead. We're getting like pounds of grit off these courts, and they're kind of getting slippery. And it looks like the overlay has deteriorated to the point where we're down to, we need a recoating of some sort. These courts, according to industry standards, they should be resurfaced about every 5 years. And prior to Carl's arrival, we were resurfacing them every 5 to 6 years, I believe, depending on conditions. But now I heard recently that we're talking 7 to 8 years resurfacing, and I don't think that's going to work, because they'll be shot in 7 to 8 years. I was just curious, is this a planned event, or what is the plan here?
Carl?
The gentleman's comments are accurate in the fact that we are aware that we have a desanding. The courts they were completed in 2018, and in fact in November of 2018. So they are beyond their 5 years of the manufacturer recommended. Just in fiscal prudence, we make an observation every single year of whether we can extend, a court surface life, or we can extend a carpet life, all those things. And then we also walk those items every single year with the properties committee. The sanding is more of an aggravation. If we're not blowing or sweeping it off, then it does have a little bit more of opportunity to be slick. But in comparison to the issues that we were facing for the same reason of aging or extended life, when we walked Palm Ridge, remember our comments as a committee, they really don't look like they needed resurfacing in this particular budget that we're talking about. Well, that ended up not being true. So in fact, Russ made report today that, we sat down with the vendor, he provided us product, Russ's facilities maintenance team repaired areas of the Palm Ridge pickleball service. There is no comparison. Palm Ridge truly aged out in approximately 5 or 6 of the courts, but that was it, and it was in the high play areas. At R.H. Johnson, they are at their finished life. I'm going to say that I would not make a recommendation to go any further. But unless we want to make a recommendation to move it into the 24-25 capital year, we believe that it would last to where it's allocated right now, which is in 25-26. So one more budget cycle. That is the impact of cost of resurfacing those 100% of those courts is $160,000. So I have that information right now. I know that. So if there was any chance of adding it to this budget that we're discussing right now at this late of a moment, it's $160,000 impact. And I would say that over the last 2 months, I discussed operational discussions about tennis and pickleball, and I understand what our recommendations from this committee are about renovations of tennis and shared pickleball space at Kuntz, and you're saying no, is your recommendation. But I would advise that if we were spending $160,000 to revise or resurface the R.H. Johnson tennis courts, that you take in consideration that the trending of pickleball going into that facility, that train is going in that direction, whether we've made that decision today or not, which we have not. But do you want to spend $160,000 on 16 tennis courts in 24-25 when the opportunity of maybe some of them courts should be considered pickleball? I'm not the person to say that, but or in 25-26, are a particular amount of those tennis courts going to become pickleball? So based on what the gentleman is saying, yes, the courts are due for a resurface. Do you want it to recommend it to be done in 24-25? Is 100% of $160,000 as tennis? Or do you want a portion of that considered for a pickleball conversion? Or do you want to wait to 25-26 and have more information at that time about pickleball and tennis and how our future is going in that trending area?
Carl, I have one comment to make or a question to ask. Mike, are you talking about all of the courts that are in this bad a shape, or just a particular group that are particularly peeling and safety issues and chances of falling?
It is the entire facility. The maintenance man is pulling off literally 5-10 pounds of grit off of each court when he cleans them.
I would like to comment to that.
Thank
So that is not an accurate amount of sand. We get every time we clean a court, which is quarterly. So I'm not saying that there's not desanding on a daily basis, but it's not an unsafe desanding. The courts have aged out. They are giving up their sand that's mixed into the paint. And every quarter that we clean, we get a tennis can about 1/3 full. And that also is about the same amount that we get from just brooming or sweeping on a monthly basis. So it's not 5 or 10 pounds. I don't want any exaggeration about this. And there is no peeling happening on the courts. If there's an area of peeling, then that has not been brought to operations attention, and facilities maintenance has not been given the opportunity to fix it. So that is not happening. I walked 100% of the courts this week, but the desanding is happening, just so you know.
Mike, have you made any attempt to speak with Russ about this, if there's anything other than total resurfacing?
I myself have not. I know the president of the club, Bruce Dugan, brought, I think it was Carl and Bill Schwind and Casey over last year to show them the grit on the courts. And I know the maintenance tries to keep them clean, but he's one man and there's 16 courts. So it's it's hard for him to keep up. And as far as the amount, I'm not trying to exaggerate anything. I saw a bag that I lifted and it was halfway full. I don't know if, I don't know how many courts he got it off of, but Carl is correct. It's usually about a can, as I understand, a tennis can full of grit per court, per time. And that's
Any questions
every
from the
week.
committee that you'd like to ask right now? Tom?
Carl, if it was pickleball or tennis, is there a difference in doing the courts? Because if I remember right, in the past, the tennis courts have been lined out for pickleball using the same court. Is the surface different?
So, no, the cost is not different. It is approximately $10,000 a tennis court to line it and resurface it with tennis lines. If in a very short period of time, if the trends are taking us to a governing board staff conversation of exchanging some tennis courts for pickleball, if we get there, please understand, then we will have a secondary cost. We'll have a wasted expense, because the idea that a tennis court would not be painted the same way as a tennis court. So you would then be basically resurfacing again for any changes towards a discussion of pickleball. I will tell you, the pickleball has been to our meeting rooms to show us ideas and plans. I brought that up a month ago, and that some form of changing our mindset towards discussions and planning at Kuntz, and having that discussion towards R.H. Johnson Tennis. You know, again, we're in those discussions. Pickleball has presented information that they would like to show the tennis community and the governing board 3 options of taking over some of the R.H. Johnson tennis courts and converting them to pickleball. So all I'm advising here is that it's $160,000 no matter how I paint it. But if it all gets painted tennis, because it is tennis today, that if there was any conversion to pickleball, you will have a wasted expense and have to repaint those courts again. So I'm just advising to make good decisions.
We appreciate your information, but once again, it seems we have suddenly 2 very different issues we're discussing, one of which has not had the courtesy to keep the Properties Committee informed at all. I'm disappointed in that, of hearing it second and third hand. I think the Properties Committee deserves to be fully informed. And I'm not going to get into that discussion today because that's not why we're here. The issue before us today is the issue, do we have a safety issue? Would it be remiss of us to ask Russ to go out to the courts and take a look and see if there's any kind of a solution, and come back to us with more information?
There is no safety issue. But the
Well,
courts.
if they slip and fall, that's a safety issue.
Let me clarify, please. There is no safety issue today, but the courts are due for resurfacing. So if your recommendation is for staff to implement $160,000 to resurface it as 100% 16 courts of tennis, please make that recommendation.
Nancy?
I'm getting this, we need that master plan. We don't know that pickleball's gonna come and do that. I mean, I know it's taking over the world, but it's also taking a lot of knees out. I think we're looking at apples and oranges. I think this gentleman who came up that represents the tennis courts, I don't think they have any intention to giving some back to pickleball.
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends that are in tennis, and it just seems like we're pickleball, but not so much on tennis. And I have to agree, I can't believe we're sitting here in March, and we had an issue on those courts, and you know about it, and Russ did, and it never even got on the first thing for us to look at. And here we are in March hearing that it's slippery. You know, if you're out there playing tennis and you're going for the ball, you'll slide. And that's trouble. So I kind of feel like this came up on us a little bit like the fence, last time. We didn't know there was a safety issue, so we voted for that fence out there, and Russ went out with his crew, thank goodness, and kind of, made it better.
I'm sorry.
It feels like this should be feels like we should be fixing this. Go ahead, Carl.
I invite everyone out there to go with me and Russ to the courts today, and you're going to find that is not the circumstance. You're not going to go out there and find your slide and do your shuffle. There's desanding going on just because of the age of the courts, but it's in a time frame that if we follow the reserve study timeline of useful life, we will be fine going to 25-26 capital budget when this would be appropriately brought up. It's not an issue because it's not on this budget cut. It wasn't an issue. They are making us aware that they're experiencing desanding. Our evaluation is that we don't have an unsafe condition because every day we do our blowing, we do our sweeping, we do our quarterly cleaning, and it's not the same conditions. I mentioned that Palm Ridge, through our observance, you didn't think that it was worthy of getting a resurfacing, okay? If I take you over to tennis right now, you're definitely going to have that same observance. So I hope you defer to our judgment on how we are looking at them courts. That's the only reason it's not in this budget.
But I understand that the warranty or the manufacturer said 5 years, and how did it get turned from 5 years to 8 years?
That's a recommendation. If we get an extended life out of a carpet or
Oh,
a
sure,
court
sure.
surface, that's a financial benefit to us. Our roof warranty is 10 years extended every time I do a roof restoration. But thank goodness, most of the time, because of our due diligence, we get 12, 13, 14 years out of a roof. So
Sure,
that,
I understand that.
that's the
I understand you
reasoning
have to put stuff off. It doesn't seem like we're sort of kicking the can down, like you had said with the other fence. It just seems like these guys are here at this meeting, they're saying, yeah, it's slippery, so.
Sherry?
I think we have to trust our staff too, that they've gone out and they looked at it and they figured out how to deal with the situation. I mean, if I wanted new surface and new this, or I wanted new carpet in a certain room, you know, we've had situations in this committee where people have come and raised the flag that this needs to be fixed or this needs to be fixed. And when we go take our staff out there and even do our walkthroughs, we don't see the same thing.
Ellen?
We don't play on it either, and neither do these guys. They're not players.
I
Might be different if you're a
I just want to
player.
make it clear, I am happy to implement $160,000 in this budget to solve this next year, if that's the recommendation you would like to give. I have no question about that.
Madam Chair, I think we're moving kind of toward an unproductive discussion, and I don't think we want to be pointing fingers at anybody here. I respect the gentleman for coming up and raising the issue. I respect the comments of the staff in terms of what work they've done. I think the most prudent thing for us to do at this point is, why don't we have, and I don't know whether it's Russ and Carl, Russ or Carl, but why don't we have one of the two of you and representative from the tennis club go out. Let's take another look at the courts and have you guys come back at the next meeting and report back on your findings, so that this committee can then make a prudent decision on whether or not this is something we want to address. I do think that we have to consider two things. One, obviously, we want to consider what's the most reasonable timing to do expenditures given the evolving and changing needs of the community. But secondarily, I think more importantly, is I want to make sure that when our folks who love tennis are going out there to play, they feel safe and comfortable. I think we all share in that. So I'm less influenced around, if we have a safety issue now, I'm less influenced to say, well, let's hold off until later because it might change. But at the same time, I do respect that we have to make reasonable decisions, and I think that's the right course of action to do. And let's avoid finger pointing at each other. It's just not productive.
Thank you, Ellen. John?
Thank you. Well spoken, Alan. My thoughts parallel yours. So I'm going to ask our chairperson if we could maybe beg the indulgence of the governing board and ask for an exemption on this one item. And I think a physical appearance, as we did in the fall, is in order to get as best information as we can from all points of view. All the points I heard, I think, are worthy of consideration.
Are you suggesting that we do what Ellen just said, have them go out and come back to us next month, or are you suggesting another site visit by this committee?
I'm suggesting another site visit by this committee because that would be consistent with what we have done on every other project.
Okay, just wanted to make
I
sure.
know that it means more work on our behalf, but I think in fairness to all concerned, that's our job.
Thank you.
I would accept that amendment.
Okay, we do have, yes, Mr. Cassandra, and then we do have another speaker waiting to speak.
I'm sorry to bring this up, but, we've never had this problem before. The courts are always, refinished and, they always, we've never run into this before. This is kind of a new thing for us, so my apologies, but.
No need to apologize. I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, your facts are accurate, other than the poundage. I don't want it to be more dramatic than it is. The courts are desanding. I am glad to hear that this committee would like to go review that, and I would like to schedule that for next week if we could, please. Tuesday through
Yes.
Friday sometime.
Our next speaker, and then we'll go back to the date situation.
My name is Harold Lind, rec card 136821. I'm vice president of the tennis club. And I just want to thank the committee for taking this opportunity to, hear Mike and pretty much have the same things to say, so I just won't go back through those. I do want to point out, however, that in March of last year, prior to the Swing in the Spring tournament, I did meet with Carl and Bill Schwinn and Jolene Piaskowski, who is the chair of the Swing in the Spring committee, because that's when the issue reared its ugly head with this grit separating from the acrylic and being all over the courts. And it was reported to me, I'm also safety chairman down there. We have a drop-in group that plays 3 days a week. Most of them are over 80 years of age. And the grit was there. They were sliding on it. It was reported, and it was vacuumed up, swept, whatever you want to call it. And that's what happens is you clear it off of there, but that as you play, the friction from your shoes, the stopping and turning and whatever breaks more of that loose as you're playing. When the maintenance gentleman is down there, he may do 2 courts a day if he can get that in, because he's only one man. And I had collected 3 full tennis cans, and this was off of, we're getting about a can, which is about like this, off of 2 courts, and that's per day. It's not something that, like, I could go down there now and we might be fine, but if there was play on the court and I go back there tomorrow, I may find that grit surface there. Not disputing, that it's not there, but there's also cleaning procedures that may be causing this issue as well, because they're using different types of sweepers that may be causing too much pressure on that, and it's accentuating the problem. So anyway, I appreciate you being able to take a look. I'd love to be part of that walkthrough and things. And we've got a Swing in the Spring coming up here in a couple of weeks. And I think we can make through it, but we also have a cleaning schedule. My understanding is that they're supposed to clean the courts between now and the Swing in the Spring, which that will help short term, but long term, no, you're going to see that rear its ugly head on a continuous basis. Like I said, it was a year ago prior to Swing in the Spring, and this has been an ongoing issue. So,
Butch, I have one other question. Do you have a Swing into Spring tournament coming up soon?
yeah, in about 2 weeks.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
So, and anyway, and of course, we want to put our best foot forward. We've got people coming in from out of town to play in it, just like the pickleball club has folks coming from all over the world, I understand. We spent so much money on this complex back in 2018. That was Carl's first major project and stuff. And it was a beautiful facility then, but it has just aged, and we just haven't seen a focus on the tennis courts to maintain them at that level that we started at five years ago or 6 years ago. So, and it's something we take a great amount of pride in, and yes, it does attract people into the community, because yes, there are still tennis players out there. We're not all pickleball players. So, thank you.
Thank you. Carl, you got a comment?
Director Williams, may I make a recommendation for, if it works with your schedule, Tuesday, 9 a.m., March 12th? And then if you want to
March
report
12th.
back to me,
March 12 at 9 a.m.
yes?
Will everybody please check their calendars and get back to me if you are available on that date? You're not available? Okay. Just get back to me with an email, and then I'll get back to Carl and let us know if that date's going to work. So, for at least a majority of us. So,
And I'd be happy to walk it again with anybody that could not attend. That would be not, I'd be happy to walk with anybody that can't attend.
to do a separate one for
Yeah,
that?
sure.
Okay, well, if you'll get back to me, because some of us may not have our calendars with us right now, if you'll get back to me today and see if that date and time works, then we can, and then you can schedule a separate one if you need to.
That would be great. I'll give you all my available time for next week, so Carl can pick one that would work.
Okay, that would
Work
be
for
great,
him.
rather than try to resolve it
Yeah,
right now.
right.
Thank you all for your patience. Any other comments from anyone in the audience?
I have one.
You have one.
Yes, more clarification. So there seems to be a misconception as to what facilities maintenance does as far as repairing. We do not typically repair surface. We do like damaged spots, things that would spall out. We do not do the surface on the tennis court. We don't have the equipment nor the manpower for that kind of thing. We stepped out of our square to do the pickleball issue because it was ground down slick as could be. So trying to save a buck, having the vendor come in, I used to pull color way back in the day, so I figured you get us a small little squeegee and we can pull off a little 3-foot kitchen area, and I think we only did 6, 7 courts at the time. Typically, we don't do surface, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
If there are no further comments, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. See you next month.